She shouldn't have noticed it. Not in the blur of shifting maps, radios buzzing and men in pressed uniforms tossing clipped words across the briefing table, but she did. A hesitation, a line of ink, a shadow on the satellite feed. And it gnawed at her. Emma Cade sat near the end of the table, deliberately invisible. Her jacket bore no rank, just the dull green of someone meant to blend in. To them she was attached, a consultant, a specialist whose skill set was acknowledged but rarely invited into conversation. She wasn't supposed to speak, not here, not in this room thick with authority and certainty. But the knot in her chest pulled tighter. Because the truth was simple, they were wrong. The enemy wasn't where they thought he was. He was closer, much closer. Her eyes darted back to the projection, grainy overhead shots of a valley, a scatter of rooftops, shadows stretched long by the Afghan sun. They spoke of a stronghold 2 ridges east, but Emma saw the detail no one else had paused on: the irrigation lines leading back, the subtle tire marks circling in. A pattern her sniper's eyes couldn't unsee. They were all looking out. She knew she had to look in. Her throat tightened as the commander's voice drummed on. We hit hard at dawn, full company sweep. A nod from one officer, a scribble from another. The rhythm of men convinced. Emma's hand tightened around her pen until the plastic flexed. Say something. But her chest answered with silence. She remembered the last time she'd spoken up in a room like this. She remembered the looks, patience masking dismissal, as if the girl in the corner was playing soldier. And she remembered the cost of being ignored. The cost still haunted her when she closed her eyes at night. So she bit down the urge, and the meeting rolled past her like a storm. When it ended, chairs scraped and boots thudded away. She stayed seated, eyes fixed on the screen even as it flickered black. She whispered almost to herself. He's not out there, he's already here. No one heard. No one wanted to. The hallway was colder, the kind of sterile air that smelled faintly of dust and oil. Emma walked it alone, her footsteps hollow. The hum of fluorescent lights followed her until the sound of laughter from a distant mess hall broke it apart. She stopped at a window slit, looking out at the desert night. Darkness had weighed here, and silence too, thick enough to press on the chest. She thought of her brother then, always at night, always when it was quiet. He'd been younger by 3 years, restless, curious, he begged to enlist. Emma had told him no, begged him back, but the war didn't listen, the war never did. His convoy had been hit outside Kandahar. She was the one who had to identify him. Or rather, what was left. That was the night Emma swore she'd never ignore her instincts again, that she'd learned to see what others missed, to read the small signs that meant the difference between walking home and being carried. And now tonight those same instincts screamed. She pressed her palms flat against the sill. If she was wrong, she'd be branded paranoid, reckless. If she was right and stayed silent, they'd all walk into the teeth of it. Her whisper fogged the glass. What would you have done, Nate? The silence answered. Sleep never came. She sat on her bunk, boots still laced, watching the seconds crawl on her watch. Outside, generators hummed and trucks coughed awake. She cleaned her rifle by touch, each piece sliding back together like a ritual that kept her breathing steady. Her mind wandered to the last letter her brother had sent her. She still carried it, folded and worn, in the chest pocket of her rucksack. The handwriting was sloppy, rushed. He'd written about sandstorms, about a stray dog his unit had fed scraps to, about missing home. But at the bottom, scrawled in uneven ink, he'd written something else. Don't ever let them silence you, Em. You see things we don't. She clenched the letter tighter. Maybe he hadn't known what he meant. Maybe it was just a line. But tonight it felt like a command. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when the outpost came alive. Soldiers moved with mechanical rhythm, loading magazines, slinging packs, tightening straps. The smell of fuel and sweat and dust blended into one. Emma moved among them like a ghost. Her rifle case strapped to her back, her rucksack weighted. She checked and rechecked gear until her fingers ached. She knew the men by sight if not by name, laughing banter covering nerves, small rituals to hide fear. One man kissed a silver cross on a chain before stowing it under his vest. Another tucked a folded photo of his daughter into a sleeve pocket. And she wondered how many of them would make it back. The commander's voice cut through the morning. Convoy loads in 5. Engines roared, dust rose. Emma was tightening the strap on her pack when a shadow fell across her, Sergeant Cole Anders. He had a way of looking at her that unsettled her, not dismissive, not patronizing, just searching, as if trying to decide whether she was a locked door worth opening. You don't look convinced, he said. His tone was quiet, not accusatory. Emma forced a shrug, just tired. Cole's gaze lingered a moment longer, then he said something that felt heavier than the words themselves. Tired gets men killed. And just like that, he moved away, barking orders to his squad. Emma's chest tightened again. He saw too much. But not enough, not yet. The convoy rolled out just as the sun cracked the horizon. The desert stretched endless, painted gold and white, the air already hot. Soldiers jostled in the back of armored vehicles, helmets knocking, rifles clattering against metal. Emma sat near the door, back against the seat, her eyes on the landscape rushing by. She traced the ridgelines, the folds of earth, the subtle signs. Most saw emptiness. She saw potential cover, possible sightlines. Her gut twisted, every turn of the wheels felt wrong. She closed her eyes, her brother's voice in her head, "Trust what you see." And she saw it again. The irrigation lines, the tire tracks. The truth. He's not out there. He's already here. Hours later, the convoy fanned out near the ridgeline. Boots hit gravel, radios crackled. The valley stretched below, wide and still, too still. Emma dismounted, rifle in hand, her movements automatic. She scanned rooftops, windows, doorways. The sun was merciless, bleaching the world into stark contrasts. Shadows cut sharp, hiding secrets in their blackness. The commander gave signals, units split, the sweep began. At first nothing, just the crunch of boots, the hiss of static, the distant bleat of a goat. Children's eyes followed them through cracks in doors, faces wary, silent. But Emma's pulse wouldn't slow. Her eyes combed every corner, every glint. And then she saw it. The flash. Barely there, metal catching sun from the wrong slope. Not in the valley. Behind them. Her breath hitched, her finger froze on the trigger guard. No one else had noticed. The enemy wasn't waiting ahead. He was already above them. Should she shout, break silence, risk being dismissed again until the bullets proved her right? Emma's heartbeat thudded loud in her ears. She could almost hear Nate whispering, "Don't let them silence you." Her lips parted, the word gathered in her throat. And then, the first shot cracked. A soldier dropped, dust blooming around him, radios screamed, chaos ignited. Emma dropped to her stomach, rifle snapping to her shoulder, scope finding the ridge. Shapes moved in the heat shimmer, figures, rifles, muzzle flashes. The valley thundered with gunfire. And Emma knew the truth, bitter and sharp in her chest. They never believed her. And now they were paying for it. The first crack of gunfire didn't sound like it did on the range. On the range, it was clean, controlled, contained by expectation. Here it was chaos, a sound that ripped the desert silence apart, jagged and merciless. Dust erupted where a soldier had stood only seconds ago. His body folded into the gravel, lifeless, before anyone had time to breathe. Then came the second shot, and the third. Automatic bursts followed, rattling down the slope above them. Emma's instincts took over. She dove behind a boulder, dirt biting her palms, her rifle already up. Her scope cut through the haze, and there, shadows darting along the ridgeline. Enemy rifles braced, muzzles flaring like sparks against the sun. She had been right, and the bitter taste of it caught in her throat. Being right didn't matter if it was already too late. Radio screamed. Contact, contact. Bearing north slope. We're pinned. Voices blurred together, boots scrambled for cover. The convoy, strung out and exposed, was suddenly a target line in the dust. Soldiers who had been joking minutes ago now crawled, ducked, pressed flat against whatever scraps of earth shielded them. Emma's scope locked onto a figure cresting the ridge. She squeezed. Her first shot snapped, clean, deliberate. The figure toppled. A heartbeat later, she was shifting, scanning, firing again. The recoil jolted into her shoulder. The sound didn't stop the pounding in her chest. Someone landed next to her, Cole Anders, face streaked with dust, eyes blazing sharp. He ducked low, bullets biting the rock above their heads. "You saw this coming, didn't you?" he shouted over the storm. Emma's jaw clenched. She wanted to say yes, she wanted to scream it. Instead, she just chambered another round. They're dug in on the ridge. Cole cursed under his breath, slamming his radio to his mouth. "Command, this is Bravo, enemy elevated position, we're static. Only static." The ridge must have been jamming comms, or maybe they were too deep in the canyon for signals to punch through. Which meant they were alone. Emma pressed her cheek to the stock, lining up another shot. She counted movement, 4, maybe 5 hostiles in sight, but more shifting behind the rocks. This wasn't a stray ambush, it was coordinated, prepped. The convoy had walked into a kill zone. A soldier scrambled from one truck to another, trying to mount the turret gun. A burst cut him down mid-step, his helmet spinning into the dust. Another soldier lunged forward, dragging him back by the straps, screaming his name. Emma's stomach knotted. She had seen enough battles to know chaos spread faster than bullets. She whispered to herself, steadying her breath, "Find the anchor, break the line." Her brother's words once again, he'd used them on the basketball court before a game. Later, she used them here. She scanned the ridge. One figure wasn't firing, just moving, gesturing, directing. There, the anchor. She held her breath. Her trigger squeezed. The man dropped. For a moment, the enemy's rhythm faltered. Cole slammed fresh rounds into his rifle, teeth bared in a grimace. Nice shot. Emma didn't answer. She couldn't afford the distraction. Her focus stayed locked, her breathing disciplined. She didn't feel pride, only a dull ache in her chest. For every shot she placed, one of theirs still fell. A young private nearby clutched his bleeding leg, crying out for a medic. Emma's peripheral vision caught the frantic scramble of another soldier tying a tourniquet with shaking hands. The boy's face was pale, streaked with sweat and dust. He couldn't have been more than 19. His lips trembled with words that didn't sound like orders or prayers, just raw fear spilling out. Emma's throat tightened. For a second she was back at the morgue, staring down at Nate's broken body. For a second she couldn't breathe. Cole's voice cut sharp beside her, Cade, eyes up. She snapped back to her scope. Another figure appeared at the ridge, RPG hoisted onto a shoulder. Her breath stilled, she fired. The man crumpled, the RPG clattered harmlessly onto the rocks. A small victory. But only small. Minutes stretched like hours. The firefight roared and dipped, a storm with no pattern. The sun beat mercilessly, baking sweat and grit into her skin. And then an explosion rocked the ground. One of the convoy trucks lit up in flames, black smoke curling upward like a scar across the sky. The blast sent men sprawling, ears ringing, dust choking the air. Emma pressed against the dirt, ears buzzing. She blinked against the smoke. For a moment she thought she saw Nate's face in it, wide-eyed, gone too soon. She slammed the image out of her head. Vogus, stay alive. Cole dragged her back down as stray rounds cracked the stone above them. His face was smeared with soot, but his eyes stayed fierce. They're not pulling back, they want us buried here. Emma nodded, swallowing hard. Then we move. But moving wasn't simple. The convoy was strung out, pinned from above. Any attempt to climb the ridge meant exposing themselves. Staying meant waiting to be chewed apart, one truck at a time. Cole knew it, Emma knew it. But the men around them, young, tired, scared, they needed direction. Emma scanned quickly, eyes mapping the terrain. A shallow draw cut up toward the ridge, a line of jagged rocks giving cover in fragments. Not perfect, not safe, but something. She tugged Cole's sleeve, pointing, "There, it's the only way." He studied it, jaw tight, then he gave her a look, one that carried both trust and the weight of consequences. "You laid it, they'll follow you." Her pulse stuttered. "Me. You saw this before any of us. They need someone who believes what they see." The words burned in her chest, her brother's echo given new voice. She nodded. Emma rose from cover, shouting through the chaos, "With me, cover fire on my mark." Some heads turned, confusion flickered, but Cole was already up behind her, adding his own thunder to the call. You heard her, move. Adrenaline shoved fear aside. The squad answered, rifles raised, bursts cutting into the ridge. Emma broke from cover, sprinting low toward the draw. Bullets snapped past, gravel spraying her arms. Her breath rasped, lungs clawing for air. She dove behind the first rock outcropping, heart hammering. Two men followed, then another. Cole brought up the rear, barking at stragglers to move. The climb began, step by step, cover to cover, they pushed upward. Every inch was paid in sweat, in blood, in the desperate grit of men refusing to die in the dirt. Emma's scope picked off what it could, her voice shouted commands she never thought she'd give. Left flank, cover him, push forward, keep your head down. The ridge loomed closer, the enemy's fire slackened, no longer confident. For the first time since the ambush began, Emma felt a sliver of hope. Not victory, not safety. Just the fragile breath of maybe. Then it happened. A voice behind her, young, shaky, "Ma'am, I'm hit." She turned, one of the privates who had followed her, clutching his stomach, blood spreading hot across his vest. His rifle slipped from his hand as he slumped. Emma lunged, catching him before he hit the ground. His eyes were wide, glazed with shock. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her hands over the wound. Blood seeped fast between her fingers, too fast. He coughed, tried to speak. His lips formed words she barely caught. Tell my mom." Emma's throat closed. She couldn't promise, she couldn't lie. Her hands trembled, helpless against the tide of red. Cole was there, dragging her back, forcing her hands off the boy as the medic rushed in. His grip was rough, urgent. "Cade, we can't stop now." Her chest burned, her eyes stung, she wanted to scream, but she let him pull her because stopping meant death for everyone else still climbing. As they pushed forward again, Emma glanced back once. The boy lay still, the medic shaking his head. And something inside her cracked deeper. They reached the top of the ridge just as the sun began to tilt west. The firefight hadn't ended, but for the first time the ground beneath them wasn't tilted against them. Emma dropped to one knee, sighting down at the scattering hostiles scrambling backward. Their confidence was gone, their rhythm broken. And as she squeezed off another shot, her breath shaking, one thought pounded in her chest. She had known, she had seen, but no one had listened. Now the blood in the dirt was proof. Proof paid for in lives she'd never forget. The silence that followed wasn't real silence. It was filled with echoes, shouts, groans, the crack of rifles, the hum of flies already drawn to blood, but in Emma's ears it pressed like a weight. She sat against a rock, hands still stained, chest heaving. Around her, survivors regrouped, reloaded, tended wounds. Cole lowered himself beside her, his face carved with exhaustion. For a long time he said nothing, then. "You kept us alive today." Emma stared at her hands. They didn't feel like hands anymore, just tools caked with failure. She shook her head. "Not all of us." Cole didn't argue, he didn't offer comfort. He just let the words hang in the dust, heavy and unfixable. And in that silence, Emma made herself a promise. Next time she wouldn't wait to be believed. Next time she'd speak even if no one listened. Because sometimes silence killed more than bullets. The ridge should have felt like safety. But when Emma reached the top, all she felt was emptiness. The sun slid lower, stretching shadows long across the desert floor. Smoke from the burning convoy truck smeared the sky black against fading blue. Down below, soldiers moved like broken pieces of a game no one was winning, dragging wounded, calling names that no one answered. Emma stood still, rifle still in her hands, breath raw in her chest. Dust clung to the sweat on her face, mixing with streaks of dried blood that wasn't hers. She had survived. Others hadn't. And that truth pressed heavier than any weapon she carried. Cole Anders moved past her, barking orders with the sharpness of someone holding himself together by duty alone. His voice carried across the ridge. "Check ammo, secure the perimeter, I want eyes north and west." The men obeyed, not because they weren't shaken, but because structure was the only thing left to cling to. Emma dropped to a knee, setting her rifle across her lap. Her hands shook when she pulled her canteen, the water tasting like metal and ash. She swallowed hard, forcing it down. Her gaze drifted back to the boy she hadn't been able to save. His face had blurred into pallor before the medic even reached him. 19, maybe 20. And he had asked her for one last thing, a promise she couldn't give. She clenched her jaw until it hurt. She could still feel the warmth of his blood in her palms. It didn't wash off, not really. Cole knelt beside her, the weight of exhaustion finally cracking his posture. His voice was lower now, softer. "You did good, Cade." Emma shook her head. "I didn't do enough." "None of us did," he said, a pause, his eyes held hers. "But if you hadn't moved us when you did, we'd all be down there with him." Emma looked away, unable to accept the comfort. Every death felt louder than survival. The ridge quieted as the enemy melted back into the landscape, leaving only echoes of gunfire and the thick ache of absence. For a while no one spoke much. Men sat with their backs against rocks, rifles across their knees, faces hollow. A medic stitched one soldier's arm with trembling hands, another wrapped gauze around a cracked rib. The desert wind picked up, carrying sand that whispered against their gear. The smell of smoke lingered, acrid and heavy. Emma scanned the horizon, her scope sweeping wide, not for targets, not anymore, just for answers. Why here, why now? How had the enemy known exactly where to set their trap? This wasn't luck. It was information. And that meant someone had given it to them. The thought chilled her more than the wind. She tucked it away, but it clung, persistent. When night fell, the ridge became their reluctant camp. No tents, no fires, just silence broken by coughs, muted curses, and the rustle of men trying to sleep on stone. Emma didn't lie down. She sat with her rifle upright, watching the valley below as stars stitched themselves across the sky. She thought of her brother again. Nate would have hated this silence. He used to fill quiet with stories, dumb jokes, restless questions. He was always talking until the war silenced him forever. Emma clenched the letter she carried, the paper worn soft from her touch. She read the last line again, lips moving in the dark. "You see things we don't." Her chest ached. She whispered into the night as if Nate could hear, "But they won't listen." The desert didn't answer, only the hum of crickets and the distant bark of a dog from some unseen village below. By dawn, orders crackled through on the radio. Extraction was delayed. They were to hold position until further notice. The men received the news with tired nods, no surprise. War rarely moved to anyone's timetable but its own. Cole passed Emma a ration pack. Eat. She took it, though the thought of food turned her stomach. The taste of chalky protein and dry crackers stuck in her throat. She chewed anyway because not eating was weakness, and weakness meant mistakes. As they sat, Cole studied her. You saw it coming, didn't you? Emma froze. What? The ambush. You had that look in the briefing, like you knew something the rest of us didn't. Her pulse quickened. She stopped, biting the words back. What was the point in saying yes now? Would it sound like arrogance, a plea for validation? Cole didn't push, he just said, next time don't hold it in. Next time, the phrase burned, as if there would always be another fight, another chance to be ignored, another boy dying with her hands pressed useless against his chest. Emma looked away, whispering under her breath, if there is a next time. Hours blurred together, patrols up and down the ridge, checking ammunition, water, positions, the rhythm of survival. But Emma's eyes kept returning to the valley below. Something gnawed at her. The ambush hadn't been desperation, it had been precision. A setup that required timing, knowledge, confidence. She replayed the convoy route in her head. The enemy hadn't stumbled onto them, they had known. And if they had known, someone had told them. The thought sat like a stone in her stomach. She wanted to dismiss it, but the pattern was too clear. The irrigation lines, the tire tracks she'd noticed on the satellite feed, they hadn't been random. They had been markers, signals. Which meant someone on the inside was feeding those signals. Her fingers tightened around her rifle. Betrayal wasn't just a word. Out here it was death multiplied. That night, when most of the men had fallen into restless sleep, Emma stayed awake. She crept a little away from the group, high enough on the ridge that the wind covered her movements. Her scope scanned again, but she wasn't just looking for enemies. She was looking for patterns, flashes, signals, anything out of place. And then she saw it. A faint light flickering from the valley floor, too small for a fire, too deliberate for chance, a coded signal. Her chest tightened. She adjusted the scope, straining. A figure moved in the darkness, half hidden near a ruined wall. The flicker blinked once, twice, 3 times, then vanished. Emma's breath caught. It hadn't been directed toward the valley. It had been directed upward, toward the ridge. Toward them. She lowered her rifle, her heartbeat hammering. Which meant someone here on the ridge in their group was answering back. She turned slowly, scanning the sleeping forms of her squad. Exhausted men sprawled on rocks, some murmuring in dreams, others dead silent. Their faces, even in shadow, looked hollowed out, human in their weakness. Any one of them could be carrying the enemy's whispers. Her mouth went dry. The betrayal wasn't an abstract suspicion anymore. It was here, breathing the same dust, sharing the same water. Emma backed into the shadows, her chest tight. If she confronted the wrong man, she'd lose what little trust she had. If she stayed quiet, more would die. The choice pressed down like a weight she couldn't shift. She whispered Nate's name into the night, desperate for guidance, but all she heard was the wind. And in that silence, she realized something she didn't want to believe. The enemy wasn't just closer than they thought. He was already among them. Emma returned to the group just before dawn, her face unreadable. She lay down, eyes open, staring at the paling sky. Sleep never came. The next move wasn't about bullets or scopes. It was about trust. And trust was already shattered. She knew what she had to do, but doing it might make her the next body lying cold in the dirt. And yet, for the first time since the ambush, she wasn't paralyzed. She was certain. Because silence, she had learned, killed more than noise ever could. Morning light stretched thin across the ridge, pale and indifferent. The men stirred slowly, groaning as stiff bodies pushed upright, rifles clutched even in half-sleep. Dust coated their uniforms, their eyes, their voices. They looked less like soldiers now and more like shadows that had forgotten what warmth felt like. Emma hadn't slept. Her body had rested, but her mind had circled the same thought until it carved itself deep. There's a traitor among us. She kept her face calm, movement steady as she checked her weapon, clipped her pack, adjusted her scope. The discipline was automatic, but under it her pulse beat sharp and fast, a rhythm she couldn't quiet. Cole walked the line, voice steady despite exhaustion. Listen up, command says extraction window shifted again. We hold the ridge another 36, no contact unless it's forced, we dig in. The men groaned quietly, muttered curses under their breath, but they obeyed. Orders were something to cling to even when they frayed. Emma scanned their faces. Jonesy with his patched-up arm trying to laugh at something only he thought was funny. Harris silent as always, eyes darting like he was already somewhere else. Vega running his thumb across the prayer beads tied to his wrist. Each of them tired, each of them human. And one of them a liar. By midday, the sun pressed heat against them like punishment. The ridge had no mercy, just rock, glare, and silence heavy enough to choke. Emma sat on overwatch, scope sweeping the horizon. Her eyes burned, but she forced them to stay open. She couldn't risk missing another signal. Cole climbed up beside her, crouching low. He offered her a strip of dried jerky. Eat something. She took it, chewing mechanically. Her gaze stayed fixed on the valley. You're wound tight, Cole said, tighter than the rest. Emma didn't answer at first. Her fingers traced the edge of her rifle. Finally, she asked, quiet, you ever feel like the fight, not outside, like it's already here? Cole studied her, brow furrowing. What do you mean? She almost told him, the flicker of light, the signals, the certainty that someone on this ridge was feeding the enemy. The words clawed up her throat, then stuck. If Cole believed her, she'd drag him into a storm that could shatter the squad. If he didn't, she'd become the enemy in their eyes. She swallowed hard, nothing, just tired. Cole didn't press. He gave a short nod, like he understood more than he let on, and slid back down the slope. Emma's chest tightened. She hated herself for staying silent, but silence, she reminded herself, was safer for now. That night, she tested them. Quietly, indirectly. She sat near Vega as he thumbed his beads. You think they'll come back? She asked, voice casual. He shrugged. The enemy, always, it's what they do. Not them, she kept her tone flat. I mean command, you think extraction's real, or you think we're stuck here until we rot? Vega frowned, gaze flicking to her. Command doesn't forget, we'll get pulled. But his voice carried no conviction. Emma marked it. Later, when Harris limped past her to check his kit, she asked, you sleep last night? Enough, he muttered, avoiding her eyes. His pack looked too heavy, like he'd stuffed more inside than rations and ammo. Emma filed that away too. She spoke little to the rest. Instead, she listened. For slips, for tells, for anything that cracked the mask of brotherhood. But soldiers wore silence like armor, and silence gave nothing away. The second night was worse. The air felt charged, like the ridge itself was holding its breath. Men shifted restlessly in their sleep, a cough here, a muttered word there, but mostly silence. Emma forced her eyes open, even as her body screamed for rest. Her scope traced the valley again. And there it was. The flicker. Same place, same rhythm. Once, twice, three times. Her breath caught. She turned slowly, eyes sweeping the ridge behind her. This time she wasn't looking at the valley, she was watching her own. And she saw him. Just a silhouette crouched low by the rocks, a faint hand movement, deliberate, calculated. She froze. The traitor wasn't an idea anymore. He was flesh and bone, 10 meters from her. Her finger tightened on the trigger. One shot and it would be over. The enemy cut out before he could bleed them dry. But the shot would wake everyone, shatter the fragile thread holding this squad together. And if she was wrong, if her eyes had lied in the starlight, she'd damn herself beyond forgiveness. Her breath shivered. She lowered the rifle slowly, too slowly. The silhouette moved back into the darkness, blending with the others, gone. Emma sat frozen, her heart a drum in her ears. At dawn, Cole found her still awake. You didn't sleep. I wasn't tired, she lied. He studied her, jaw tight. Something's chewing at you, spit it out, Cade. Emma opened her mouth. The truth was there, raw and desperate, but again she couldn't force it out, not yet. Because she hadn't just seen a traitor. She had seen the squad mate she might have to kill with her own hands. So instead, she said, just trying to stay alive. Cole gave a humorless smile. That makes two of us. The day passed in fragments, short patrols, sips of warm water, the scrape of boots on stone. The radio crackled once with static, then fell silent again. No news, no comfort. Emma's body felt hollow, running on instinct, but her mind sharpened, focused on one truth. She couldn't keep this to herself much longer. The longer the traitor breathed their air, the more danger pressed in. That evening she caught Jonesy cracking a joke about cold beers back home. The men chuckled, thin and forced. Emma almost laughed, just to prove she was still one of them. But the sound caught in her throat. Because she realized something with sudden, painful clarity. The enemy didn't need to rush the ridge anymore. He had already lit the fuse. And unless she stopped it, it wouldn't be long before this squad tore itself apart from within. That night, Emma didn't wait for the signal. She positioned herself higher, hidden among jagged stone, her scope sweeping both valley and ridge. She watched the men one by one, breathing, moving, turning in sleep. And then there, the same silhouette, crouched, signaling. Her chest went still. She raised her rifle, finger trembling against the trigger. This time she couldn't afford hesitation. But just as she steadied her aim, a whisper broke the dark. Cade. Emma flinched, lowering the rifle. Cole knelt beside her, eyes sharp. What the hell are you doing? He asked. Her throat closed. She had seconds to decide, tell him everything and risk him not believing, or lie and carry this weight alone until it crushed her. She gripped her rifle tighter. The traitor was right there. Cole was right here. And the wrong word could kill them all. How much truth can one carry before it breaks loose? Emma's chest felt like a locked box ready to splinter. Cole's eyes pressed into hers, sharp and unyielding. What are you doing, Cade? He whispered again, lower this time, as if the rocks themselves were listening. Her rifle trembled in her grip. She glanced down the slope. The silhouette was gone, swallowed back into darkness. Too late to prove anything. Emma swallowed, her voice brittle. I thought I saw movement out there. Cole studied her, his jaw flexed. He didn't believe her, at least not fully, but he didn't call her a liar either. Finally, he leaned close. If you've got something, you bring it to me, don't shoulder it alone. Alone, the word cut deep. She wanted to tell him, to pour out everything, her brother, the signals, the traitor crouching just feet from their camp, but fear coiled inside. If Cole doubted her, if the squad turned on her, she'd lose the fragile thread of trust still binding them. She nodded instead, understood. But the truth stayed locked in her chest, beating harder than ever. By morning, the air was heavy with heat and unease. The men moved slower, eyes dull, voices clipped. Even laughter sounded strained, forced through gritted teeth. Emma watched them, every gesture, every word. The traitor was careful, blending in seamlessly. But she knew he was here. She'd seen his silhouette with her own eyes. As they ate their meager rations, Jonesy cracked another joke about bacon back home. Some chuckled. Harris stayed silent, chewing like every bite was a burden. Vega fiddled with his beads, whispering something under his breath. Normal too normal. Masks layered over masks. Cole's voice broke the fragile calm. We've got movement in the valley, could be nothing, could be a probe, stay sharp. The squad shifted into positions. Emma climbed higher, her scope sweeping wide. The valley glared back at her, empty, desolate, deceptive. Then movement, a figure darting between rocks. Another crouched low, shadows shifting where none should be. Emma's pulse quickened, they were being watched. She keyed her radio, eyes on 2, maybe 3 south slope, moving parallel. Cole's reply was crisp, copy, hold positions, don't fire unless engaged. The squad stiffened, rifles raised, waiting. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Minutes dragged, nothing, the shadows melted back into stone and sun. Jonesy muttered, ghosts. But Emma's gut churned, those weren't ghosts, they were scouts testing the ridge, marking them. And the traitor had probably told them exactly where to look. That night, she couldn't hold it anymore. She found Cole by the edge of camp, scanning the horizon. His face was drawn, lines etched deep by exhaustion. I need to tell you something, Emma said, voice low. Cole turned, reading her tone instantly. Go on. She hesitated, then forced it out. There's someone here in our squad, signaling to the enemy. I've seen it twice, flickers from the ridge, a silhouette crouched sending signals. Cole's jaw tightened, he didn't interrupt, he let her speak. I don't know who, not yet, but it's real. That's why they're on us, why they keep finding us. We're bleeding from the inside. Silence, the kind that could crush. Finally, Cole exhaled slowly. You're sure? Yes, her voice broke. I know what I saw. Cole dragged a hand over his face. For a moment he looked older, worn down by too many burdens. If I tell the squad, he said quietly, we fracture. Suspicion will eat us alive. Men will point fingers, trust dies, and when trust dies, so do we. Emma's throat ached, she knew he was right, but staying silent would kill them too. Cole studied her, then we watch, quietly, we catch him in the act, and when we do, his eyes hardened. We end it. Emma nodded, relief and dread twisting together. She wasn't alone anymore, but the weight of what that meant pressed heavy. The next day, the enemy came closer. Gunfire cracked from the valley slope, sudden and sharp. The squad hit the dirt, returning fire. Dust exploded, bullets whining overhead. Emma's rifle found a target, an enemy fighter leaning from cover. She exhaled, squeezed, dropped him. Another shadow moved, another shot, another fall. The firefight was short but fierce. When it ended, silence rushed back in, ringing in her ears. Cole checked the line, everyone good. A chorus of strained affirmatives. Harris had a graze on his leg, nothing fatal. Jonesy slapped his shoulder like it was nothing. Vega murmured a prayer. Emma wiped sweat from her brow, scanning again. The attack had been probing, testing their defenses. The main force hadn't hit yet, but it would. And when it came, the traitor's signal would guide it straight to their throats. That night, Emma stayed awake with Cole. They watched the men from the shadows, eyes sharp, nerves frayed. Hours passed, the ridge was quiet, too quiet. Then movement. Emma tensed, pointing. A figure crouched near the rocks, the same silhouette she'd seen before. His hand flickered light against stone, signaling. Cole's eyes narrowed, he saw it too, no denying it now. Emma's chest tightened, she whispered, "Who is it?" Cole raised his binoculars, studied the figure, his breath caught. Harris. Emma's stomach dropped. Harris, the quiet one, always keeping to himself, always carrying more than his share of weight. She wanted to deny it, to believe her eyes lied, but the truth burned clear. Harris was the leak. Cole's jaw clenched. "We take him at dawn, quiet, controlled." Emma nodded, but unease churned. Harris was careful. If he sensed suspicion, he'd vanish into the rocks, or worse, lead them all into a trap. As dawn bled across the sky, Cole moved first. He approached Harris casually, voice even. "Walk with me, need to check the west slope." Harris hesitated, then nodded, falling into step. Emma shadowed them, rifle loose in her grip, heart hammering. When they reached the edge of the ridge, Cole turned sharp, pressing Harris against the rocks. "We know, Harris, the signal's the enemy, don't play dumb." Harris's eyes widened, then hardened. "You think it's me?" Emma stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "We saw you last night signaling." For a moment Harris said nothing, then he laughed, short and bitter. "You don't get it," he spat. "Command abandoned us, we're dead already, I just made sure I'd have a way out." Emma's stomach lurched. "You sold us out." Harris's face twisted. "I survived, that's more than most can say." Cole's fist slammed into his chest, pinning him harder. "You cost lives, you nearly cost all of us." Harris sneered, "Better them than me." The words hung like poison. Emma raised her rifle, hands trembling. Harris stared at her, unflinching. "Go ahead, do it, pull the trigger, add one more body to the pile." Her breath caught, her brother's face flashed in her mind. The promise she'd made to trust her instincts, to protect the ones who still had a chance. She couldn't hesitate, not now. Her finger brushed the trigger. But Cole's hand caught her rifle, pushing it down. His voice was low, steady. "No, not like this, we do it clean, controlled, we bring him back if we make it out." Emma's chest heaved, she wanted to scream, to end it right there, but Cole's eyes held her, anchoring her in place. Harris smirked as if he'd won something, but Emma saw the flicker of fear behind it. Cole bound his hands, rough and tight. "You'll answer for this." Harris didn't reply, he just stared at the horizon where the valley stretched endless and waiting. Emma's rifle trembled in her grip. She had never wanted to pull a trigger more in her life. But the moment passed, the choice was made. And in the silence that followed, she realized something chilling. The enemy knew exactly where they were. And Harris had already given them the time. The sun had barely risen when the first shell screamed in. A whistling descent, a shattering impact. Rock and dust erupted, showering the ridge in fire. Emma hit the ground hard, ears ringing, vision blurred. Voices shouted, some sharp, some terrified. The ridge wasn't just under attack, it was being swallowed. She scrambled to her knees, rifle clutched tight. Across the chaos, Cole was dragging Harris down, shoving him behind cover. Harris's hands were bound, but his smirk still lingered, as if he'd predicted this moment all along. The enemy had come, and they knew exactly where to strike. The ridge lit up with fire. Machine guns rattled from the valley below, tracers slicing the dawn. Mortars thudded, shaking the earth beneath their boots. Jonesy screamed over the noise, "We're pinned, they've got us zeroed in." Cole barked back, steady even in the storm. "Hold positions, return fire." Emma pressed her cheek to her rifle, scope cutting through the dust. Targets emerged, fighters moving up the slope, relentless shadows surging forward. She fired, dropped one, shifted, fired again. Her world narrowed to breaths and bullets, each trigger squeeze a rhythm against the roar. But for everyone she cut down, more came. The valley seemed endless, pouring bodies uphill like a tide intent on drowning them. "Ammo," Vega's voice cracked as he crawled to reload. His prayer beads dangled from his wrist, coated in dust. Emma tossed him a mag without looking, eyes locked on her scope. Her hands shook, not from fear but from the weight of knowing the traitor had already written their fate. They were surrounded, and no extraction was coming soon enough. The squad fought like men possessed. Jonesy kept firing despite blood streaking his arm. Vega muttered prayers between bursts, words blending with the rattle of his weapon. Even Harris, bound, cornered, watched with unnerving calm, like he knew exactly how this would end. Emma shifted position, crawling to higher ground. Her vantage gave her clarity and dread. The enemy wasn't charging blindly. They were coordinated, moving in squads, covering each other. This wasn't a wild assault, it was an execution. Her throat tightened. "Cole, they're boxing us in if they crest this ridge." "I know," Cole snapped back, sweat streaking his face. He looked like a man calculating the minutes left before everything collapsed. Emma's chest burned. She thought of Nate, his convoy ambushed, his final moments likely swallowed in fire just like this. She had sworn not to let it happen again, not to let others die blind while she saw the truth. But truth alone wouldn't save them now. Hours blurred into fragments of violence, fire, dust, silence, then fire again. The squad was running dry, ammo pouches emptied, canteens light, bodies bruised. Emma's cheek was raw from the rifle stock, her hands bled from stone and grit, but she kept shooting because stopping meant death. At one lull, Cole crawled beside her, voice hoarse. "We can't hold, not like this." Her heart pounded, then what? He glanced back at Harris, tied near the rocks. Harris smiled faintly, a predator who'd already tasted victory. Cole's jaw clenched. "We move north slope, there's cover, maybe we break contact." Emma stared at him. To move meant leaving the ridge, leaving Harris's betrayal unpunished, leaving the bodies of those who'd already fallen. But staying meant annihilation. Her voice cracked. "You really think we'll make it?" Cole met her eyes. "I don't know, but staying here is suicide." The word clung to her skin. Suicide, just like her brother's convoy, just like every soldier caught in a trap they didn't see until too late. Emma exhaled, sharp and shaky. "Then we move." The order came fast, packs grabbed, ammo redistributed, wounded hoisted to their feet. Harris shoved forward, still bound, still smirking. The squad moved like shadows, slipping from stone to stone, using smoke and silence as cover. Emma's heart hammered with every step, every scrape of boot against gravel. For a moment it worked. The enemy fire shifted, searching, confused. They had bought a sliver of time. But then a shot cracked and Jonesy screamed. He crumpled, clutching his side. Blood pooled dark and fast. Emma dropped beside him, hands pressing hard. "Stay with me, stay." Jonesy coughed, eyes wide with fear. "Tell me it's not over," he rasped. Emma's throat broke. She wanted to promise, to lie, but her lips trembled too much. Cole pulled her back. "We can't stop." Emma's hands were red when she let go. Jonesy's breath rattled once, then stilled. Her chest hollowed, but her feet moved. They had to. Behind her, Harris whispered, almost gleeful, "Told you, dead already." Emma's hand twitched toward her knife, but Cole's shove kept her moving. They reached the north slope as the sun burned overhead. The cover here was better, jagged rocks, deep shadows. The squad collapsed into position, gasping, reloading what little they had left. Emma slumped against stone, blood dried on her hands. Her rifle lay heavy in her lap. She stared at the horizon where the valley stretched wide, endless. They had survived the ridge, barely, but the fight wasn't over. The enemy would come again, stronger. Cole crouched beside her, voice low. "We hold here until extraction or until we can't anymore." Emma looked at him, eyes hollow. "In Harris." Cole's jaw worked. He glanced at the bound man. Harris sat calm, eyes gleaming with something cruel. Later, Cole said, "Right now we survive." Emma's chest burned. Survival felt like betrayal, but she nodded because there was no other choice. Night fell like a shroud. The squad huddled in silence, breaths shallow, bodies broken. Vega clutched his beads so tight his knuckles bled. Harris leaned against the rocks, humming softly as if the war belonged to him. Emma couldn't sleep. Her eyes stayed on the dark horizon, ears straining for movement. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every silence felt loaded. Her mind replayed Nate's face, Jonesy's last words, Harris's sneer. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear the night apart with fury, but she stayed still, silent. Cole sat beside her, shoulders heavy. "You still think about them, don't you, the ones you lost?" Her throat tightened. "Every day." Cole nodded slowly. "Me too." They sat in silence, two ghosts still breathing. When dawn broke, so did the ridge. The enemy came again, harder, closer. Gunfire shattered the air, bullets sparking off stone, mortars shook the ground. The squad fought with what scraps they had left, each round precious, each second stolen. Emma fired until her rifle clicked empty. She grabbed another mag, slammed it in, fired again. Her world blurred into recoil and ringing ears. Then screams. Vega went down, clutching his chest. Another man staggered, blood spraying. Emma's vision tunneled. Her body moved without thought, dragging Vega behind cover, pressing hands against wounds that wouldn't close. The ridge was dying, one man at a time. In Harris bound, cornered left. Cole's voice thundered over the chaos. "Hold the line, hold." A blast cut him off. Stone shattered near his head, flinging him to the ground. He didn't move. Emma's chest froze. She crawled to him, dragging his body back. Blood streaked his face, his breath shallow. He wasn't gone, not yet. But the squad was breaking. Emma's hands trembled, her mind screamed. She thought of Nate, of Jonesy, of all the lives already stolen. She thought of Harris, smiling in the shadows, the enemy's knife within their walls. And she knew this was the breaking point. If she didn't act now, the ridge would consume them all. The ridge burned with fire. Smoke curled through the rocks, acrid and thick, choking the air. Every gunshot echoed like thunder inside Emma's skull. The squad was fractured, men bleeding, weapons nearly dry. And Cole, her anchor, her commander, lay half-conscious against the stones, blood streaking down his temple. Emma's hands shook as she pressed the bandage tighter. "Stay with me, Cole, don't you quit now." His eyelids fluttered. He tried to speak, but the words dissolved into a rasp. Finally, one cracked through, hoarse and trembling. "Why you command now?" The word sliced through her. Command. She wasn't supposed to lead. She wasn't even supposed to be here. An intelligence analyst turned field operative, shoved into shadows where her voice rarely carried weight. But now every life still breathing on this ridge balanced on her shoulders. Emma's throat tightened. "No, you're not done, you're—" Cole's hand clutched her wrist, weak but firm. His eyes, bloodshot but steady, pinned hers. "Don't hesitate." And then his grip slackened. His head tilted back, breath shallow but still there, alive but fading. Emma sat frozen for a heartbeat, world spinning. Then the decision crystallized, hard and merciless. Cole was right. Hesitation would kill them all. She rose, rifle tight against her shoulder. Dust and blood streaked across her face. And when her voice cut through the chaos, it carried a strength she hadn't known lived inside her. "Positions, reload what you have. We're holding this ridge." The squad snapped their heads toward her. Vega lay bleeding beside his beads. Another soldier groaned, clutching his leg. Harris sat bound, grinning through the smoke like he'd been waiting for this very shift of power. "Why listen to her?" Harris sneered. "She's not command, she's not anything." Emma turned on him, eyes like stone. "Shut your mouth, or I'll make sure it's the last time you open it." Something in her tone silenced him. For the first time, Harris's smirk wavered. The others looked to her, hesitant, battered. Emma's chest heaved. She saw their fear, their exhaustion, and she knew this was the moment. They needed more than orders. They needed a reason to keep standing. Her voice cracked but carried. "Listen to me, we've lost too many. Jonesy's gone, Vega's hit, Cole's down, but if we quit now, we spit on every drop of blood spilled to hold this ground. The enemy wants us broken. They want us to give up, but we're still here. Do you hear me? We are still here." The squad's eyes lit just faintly. Emma raised her rifle. "So we fight, not because we're ordered to, not because we'll win. We fight because no one takes this ridge from us alive." A murmur spread low, raw, alive. The squad tightened grips on their weapons. Even Vega, bleeding and pale, dragged his weapon into his lap with trembling hands. Emma turned back toward the valley. Shadows swarmed below, regrouping for another assault. Her jaw hardened. Positions, they're coming again. The assault came like a storm. Fighters surged up the slope, shouting, firing, their rifles spitting fire through the dawn haze. The ridge erupted once more. Emma led from the front. Her rifle barked, each shot deliberate, precise. She called targets, shifted positions, dragged the wounded to cover without hesitation. Her body moved like it belonged here, like every scar of grief and silence had forged her for this exact moment. Harris shouted over the noise, his voice taunting. "You'll never hold them, you're leading them to slaughter." Emma ignored him. She had no room left for doubt. The enemy drew closer, step by brutal step. Bullets chewed stone inches from her head. One clipped her shoulder, sending pain lancing through her arm. She bit down a cry and kept firing. Behind her, Vega coughed blood but whispered prayers between bursts. Another man screamed, hit in the leg, but steadied his weapon anyway. The ridge had become less a battlefield, more a crucible. Every man still breathing was burning inside it. Emma felt the weight of command press down, heavy and merciless. Every life, every scream, every bullet counted against her choices. But she stood unflinching, because if she broke, they all broke. Then movement at the corner of her eye, Harris. Bound but slithering toward one of the fallen men's rifles. Emma's blood went cold. She lunged, slamming her boot onto the weapon before his hands reached it. Her rifle aimed down at his chest, finger trembling on the trigger. "You traitorous bastard." Harris smiled up at her, blood on his teeth. "Go ahead, kill me, it won't change what's coming." Emma's breath shuddered. Every instinct screamed to pull the trigger, to end him here and now. He had cost them everything, her brother, Jonesy, maybe even Cole. His betrayal ran like poison through her veins. But another thought cut through, the squad watching her. Broken, bleeding, holding the line by threads. They didn't need execution, they needed focus. Her voice came low, deadly. "You're not worth the bullet." She shoved him back, kicked the rifle out of reach, and turned her fire back toward the valley. But inside, her rage coiled tighter. One way or another, Harris's reckoning would come. Hours bled into each other. The ridge became a graveyard. Smoke clung like fog, bodies scattered in craters of dust and fire. The enemy pressed harder, but every foot they gained was paid for in blood. Emma's voice grew hoarse, but she kept shouting, kept pulling men up, kept firing. She became the pulse of the ridge, steady even when her body screamed to collapse. Finally, the sound that cut sharper than gunfire. "Helicopters!" Rotors beat the air, faint at first, then rising. Emma's chest seized. Extraction. After endless hours, hope clawed its way through the smoke. "Birds incoming," she shouted. The squad lifted their heads, eyes wide with something almost forgotten relief. They fired harder, voices cracking, forcing the enemy back just enough. The first helicopter crested the ridge, guns blazing, carving gaps in the advancing line. Dust whipped into the air as it descended. Emma grabbed Cole's limp body, dragging him with every ounce of strength left. Vega was hauled up by another. The squad staggered toward salvation, one by one, leaving trails of blood in the dirt. But Harris, Emma's gaze snapped to him, still bound, still smirking even as the world collapsed. She froze, the rotor wash whipped her hair into her face. The squad was loading, shouting, reaching for her. And Emma stood, torn between vengeance and survival. Harris tilted his head, eyes gleaming. "You won't do it, you don't have it in you." Her rifle trembled in her hands, her brother's face flashed in her mind. Jonesy's final breath, Cole's blood, all the lives burned by this man's treachery. Every instinct screamed to end him, to make him pay. But behind her, Vega shouted, "Emma, now." The helicopter lifted, straining against the weight of time. If she didn't move, she'd doom them all. Emma's heart hammered. She looked at Harris one last time, saw the smirk, saw the shadow of every ghost he had created. And then she made her choice. She turned, ran, and leapt into the bird as it rose, bullets snapping in the wind. The ridge fell away beneath them, swallowed in fire and dust. Harris's face vanished into the smoke, his laughter echoing even as it faded. Emma collapsed inside, chest heaving, blood and dust smeared across her skin. Cole lay beside her, still breathing. Vega clutched his beads. The squad, what was left of it, sat hollow-eyed, alive but broken. And Emma stared out the door, heart tearing itself apart. She had saved them, but Harris still lived. And the war was far from over. The helicopter roared through the desert sky, a battered bird carrying battered souls. Inside, the cabin stank of blood, sweat, gunpowder. No one spoke, no one could. Emma sat slumped against the wall, rifle still in her hands though her arms ached like fire. Across from her, Vega clutched his beads so tightly his knuckles were bone white. His lips moved silently, prayers threading through the noise. Cole lay beside her, pale, still breathing but shallow, ragged. His chest rose and fell like each breath was a negotiation with death itself. Emma pressed her hand to his, grounding him, grounding herself. Her eyes drifted to the open side door. The ridge was already a blur of smoke and distance. Harris's face flickered in her mind, smirking, unrepentant, vanishing into the fire. She had left him alive. And the choice cut her deeper than any bullet. The bird touched down at the field hospital in a storm of dust. Medics surged in, hauling the wounded, shouting codes. Emma staggered after them, half lifting Cole until they pried him from her arms and rushed him inside. She stood there, empty, dust whipping around her boots, watching him disappear into the tense white maw. Someone called her name, Vega, leaning heavily on a crutch fashioned from his own rifle. His eyes, bloodshot, grief-lined, met hers. "You kept us alive," he rasped. "Don't forget that." Emma wanted to believe him, but in her mind she saw Jonesy's final breath, Nate's convoy burning, Harris walking free. The weight of survival never felt like triumph, it felt like betrayal. Hours blurred, reports filed, debriefs demanded, questions stabbed like needles. Why had the intel been wrong? How had Harris slipped through? How had she known what command had missed? Emma sat in a cold chair, her uniform still stained. Officers circled her with clipped voices, skeptical eyes. She gave them the truth, steady and unflinching. The signs were there, you just didn't want to see them. The room shifted, some bristled, some looked away, none admitted fault. One officer leaned in, voice sharp, "And Harris, you let him live." Emma's jaw clenched, the silence stretched until it broke with her answer. "Yes, I did." The man sneered, "Then you failed." But another voice cut in, ragged, raw, Cole. He stood in the doorway, pale, stitched, but alive. His eyes burned as he spoke, steady despite the tremor in his body. "She didn't fail, she commanded when none of you were there. She saved every man left breathing, and if she hadn't trusted her instincts, we'd all be buried on that ridge." The room went still. Cole swayed but didn't break his stare. "You want to call that failure, then you've forgotten what survival means." Emma's throat tightened, she looked down, hiding the storm in her chest. When she raised her eyes again, the officers were silent. The debrief ended, the war, of course, did not. That night, Emma walked the base alone. The desert stretched endless beyond the wire, stars burning like wounds in the black sky. Her body ached, her soul too. She thought of every name she carried inside her. Nate, Jonesy, men who'd laughed at bad jokes, shared rations, left pieces of themselves on the dirt. She wondered if she'd ever stop seeing their faces, if the silence would ever stop reminding her of what was gone. Footsteps crunched behind her, Cole, stubborn as ever, leaning on a cane, bandages bright in the moonlight. He stopped beside her, gaze fixed on the horizon. For a long time neither spoke. The desert didn't demand words. Finally Cole said, "You had the shot, you didn't take it." Emma's chest tightened. "I couldn't, not then, not with the squad watching. I don't even know if it was weakness or strength." Cole studied her, his expression unreadable. Then softly, "Sometimes strength is knowing when to hold fire, sometimes weakness is needing the trigger to feel clean." Emma let the words sink, heavy and cutting. She wanted them to absolve her, they didn't. Cole turned his eyes back to the desert. "Harris will surface again, men like him always do, and when he does," he looked at her, "you'll be ready." Her heart clenched, she nodded once slow. Days passed, the squad dispersed, some sent home, others folded into different units. Vega limped onto a transport plane, pressing his beads into Emma's palm before boarding. "For when you forget who you are," he whispered. Emma stayed, she couldn't leave, not yet. The war had stolen too much to let her rest. One evening she found herself back at the range. Her rifle cradled in her arms, the weight both familiar and unbearable. She set a target at the farthest distance, wind whipping across the sand. Through the scope, the world narrowed to crosshairs and silence. She saw Harris's face in the target. She saw Nate, Jonesy, her own. Her breath caught, she lowered the rifle. Because the truth hit her, this wasn't about revenge. It never had been. Harris was a symptom. The real enemy was closer. It was the silence that let lies spread, the arrogance that ignored warnings, the blindness that cost lives. That was what she had been fighting all along. Emma set the rifle down. She stood in the fatting light, dust curling around her boots, and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she let herself breathe. Weeks later, she received her next orders. Another mission, another valley, another chance to stand where others might fall. She packed in silence, her movements precise, methodical. When she reached for Vega's beads, she paused. The rosary dangled in her hand, worn smooth from prayers whispered in fire. She looped it around her wrist, not as faith but as memory. Cole appeared in the doorway, cane tapping the floor. He studied her pack, then her face. "You're going back out," he said. Emma nodded. "Someone has to." His eyes softened. "Don't let them silence you again." She met his gaze, and for the first time since Nate's death, she felt something like certainty. "I won't." The transport hummed beneath her as it lifted into the sky. Through the small window, she watched the base shrink, swallowed by sand and horizon. Soldiers around her sat in quiet reflection, some fidgeting, some whispering to themselves. Emma sat still, calm. Her mind replayed the ridge, the fire, Harris's smirk, but instead of anger, she felt resolve. Because survival wasn't the end. Survival was the burden carried forward. And dignity, it didn't shout, it didn't boast. It simply acted quietly again and again until silence itself was broken. Emma closed her eyes as the transport droned on. The war waited below, endless and unforgiving, but so did she. And when the enemy came close again, closer than they thought, she would be ready.